how I wish this would have turned out differently, because the power station just did not perform up to my standards. And throughout this video, I'm going to provide examples of where it failed, where I think these are very important to you guys. So I wanted to bring you the results. And if these results are important to you, be sure to leave me a comment below, because I want to make sure that I'm testing the items that are important to you. However, I did cut the testing short, and I didn't perform all the tests I usually do on power stations simply because this failed at so many different categories. And in full transparency, Oukitel did send me this portable power station to provide a product review and to share it with my audience. However, if a product underperforms or outperforms, I'm going to share those results with you all, because I think it's important that you're making informed decisions when you're going out to spend the money on a portable power station. If it underperforms, you need to know that. Now, as far as the company goes, if they see this video and they're disappointed with it, then they can address those issues, get it resolved, and then we'll go back to the drawing board to see if they're a consumer-based company or if they're just pushing out products and they don't really care about the consumer. That's not my judgment. My judgment is solely on the performance of the portable power station, whether it performs well or it doesn't. And I'm not even sure where to really start with this, because it failed at so many of these performance tests. The capacity failed. The recharge, because I was below 100%, plugged it in to charge it up, failed. It actually would not charge. You got to get it down to a certain percentage before it automatically starts to recharge. I've never seen that in any other power station. It's louder than most power stations out there. I'll show you that here in just a minute as well. And it does not charge at 1800 watts, even though it states that it will right here on the front. It does not. All of the other charging does, and we'll get to that. The cord that comes with it is not marked for any type of American wire gauge, AWG. Typically, a rated cord will have some type of indication that tells you what it's rated for, whether it's a 12 gauge wire, 14, 16, 18, whatever it is. And the UPS mode does not support the full 2400 watts of output. I was having problems at 1300 watts of output. It was tripping GFCIs. That's another issue that we've had with this. It tripped GFCI receptacle that it was on randomly. There's just a lot of things that was happening that I am definitely concerned about with this power station. I'm going to start with getting it connected to Wi-Fi. And for some of you, that is definitely not important. But for me, it's an important attribute to a power station that I'm able to connect to Wi-Fi so I can monitor it from remote locations. This would not connect to Wi-Fi. I reached out to the company. They sent me some instructions. I followed the instructions. I just could not get it to connect. And then ultimately it comes down to having to reset my router. And I don't think that should be necessary. I've never had to do that on any other power station I've ever tested. This is a 2.4 gigahertz frequency. They basically say you got to turn off your other frequencies, let it connect to 2.4, and then you can turn your router back on. I've had so many problems with my internet, and I just got it working properly. There is no way that I was going to reset my modems or turn anything off to possibly cause a problem. So unfortunately, I can't connect this to the app because it's wanting to connect at a different frequency, and the 2.4 won't connect. So if that's important to you, there's a fail. If it's not, then this is not even relevant. But I'm going to move on. I'll show you the rest of the test that I performed that I was disappointed with, and let you make the decision whether those are important to you or not. And here's something I don't understand. We're at 98%. I want to charge it to 100%. We have no input from the AC. So I have this plugged in over here on the wall. It just doesn't start to charge. So I'm not sure if that's got to fall below a certain point before it starts to charge, but I've never seen this in a power station. And to be quite honest, I do not like it. You can see where it's got the plug in right here. So if I unplug it, let's just do it here so you can see it. It removes it, but plug it back in, puts it there, no charge. And you can come over here and we can turn this all the way to the maximum, which is 1800 watts. Nothing. And I understand it shouldn't charge at 1800 watts at 98%, but maybe it should charge at the 400 watt range, but nothing happens. I would like to say if it's 98% and I want to take it to 100, I should be able to take that to 100%. And I just had it trip a GFCI. I went and reset it. Let's see if we can get that to happen again. So I'm going to plug it into this GFCI protected circuit. Come over here, kind of watch it for a bit. It was plugged in for a while before it did that earlier. So I'm not sure if we're going to be able to catch it doing it again, but that's a major problem. And what's most worrisome about that is I cannot reenact it. I cannot get it to happen again. I've tried different scenarios. This was basically setting just like it is right now, plugged in. I was waiting for it to charge and it tripped the GFCI breaker. Or GFCI receptacle. There is no other equipment plugged into any of these plugs that are on that circuit. So I have to say it was the power station that caused it, but I can't reenact it. I can't figure out where that happened or how that happened. I've checked everything. I've run different scenarios. I've done things that like plugging items in and trying to power them on to see if it would just send a short circuit or something to it, but it didn't. And that's what's worrisome is I can't figure out why it tripped that receptacle, that GFCI receptacle. That's a ground fault circuit interrupter. And this is the only thing that's plugged into that circuit, and it tripped when it was just sitting here like that. So I can't say 100% certain that it was the power station, but it was the only thing plugged into the circuit. Another test I'd like to perform on these power stations are how much noise that they put out, because depending on the proximity you're going to have this power station, that may be important to you. So let's take a look and see what type of reading we get on this one. And that's going to be the maximum noise that you'll get out of this, but that is rather loud compared to other power stations that I've tested. Closer to the fans, we're over 60, and then up here on top, we're around 55, 56. I've seen these come in as low as 35 and 40 on full charge. Right now, we are charging at full charge on supercharge. I've got this turned all the way to maximum because I'm trying to get the maximum amount of noise out of it. And that's my best recordings that I can give you guys. And although this states that it should charge up to 1800 watts, the maximum that I'm charging at is 1680 watts. And we're right at that sweet spot that this should be able to max out the AC charging at 66%. So this should be the maximum that you would charge at. So I'm getting 1682 maximum, even though over here it states 1800 watts. Let's change this down to 1200 watts and see what happens. See, it's at 1200 watts. So let's change this over to 800 watts. And we're right at 800 watts. Now let's go to 400 watts. And we're right at 400 watts. But when we switch this over to 1800 watts to 1680, even though we're right in the middle of the sweet spot where this should be charging at maximum capabilities at around 50 to 60%, 70%, this should be bumping out 1800 watts because that's what it's rated for. And something else I don't like is that this wire is not labeled to tell me what gauge wires inside of this cord. So that's concerning to me, especially since this is not charging at 1800 watts. I have 20 amp plugs, so I should be able to easily and safely charge 1800 watts if the power station would do it. And as far as my concern with the heat that this puts out, the power station does a really good job of keeping everything cool. So we have a maximum temperature or an average temperature around 90 to 95 Fahrenheit coming out of the side of this. And that's where all the heat is actually coming out. So we're getting a pretty good reading on that, and it shows that it's really cool. I don't like seeing 110, 120, anything of that sort, because I know it's not keeping it really cool on the inside, because that's the temperature that's coming out of it. So the components are even hotter. The cord itself is actually in the 70 Fahrenheit range, 75 Fahrenheit range. So we have no problem there. We have no overheating of the cord. It doesn't feel hot to touch or anything of that sort. So I have no problems with the heat that's coming out of this or how hot that this power station gets while doing a maximum charge, or the cord itself. I do have concerns with the cord not having any markings on it that identify what gauge wire that's inside of this cord. And that tripped it again. It was charging. It just happened. I'm at 91%. I'm not sure what's going on with it tripping the GFCI. So you can see that the GFCI is tripped. I'm gonna see if I can reset it and see what happens when that kicks back on. I'm not entirely positive of why that be happening. So maybe we got some electrical engineers out there that might understand why that's happening. I can use it. It doesn't trip it. Just randomly, this is occurring. I understand that that's a ground fault circuit interrupter. And typically it's got to identify some type of ground fault before it will trip that. I'm not sure why it would be happening in a power station that allows me to charge all the way up to 93% from zero, and then it trips it. And earlier it happened as well when it was just sitting here at 98% or 97%, and I was waiting for it to start to charge, and it just wouldn't charge at that rate, at that percentage, and it tripped it as well. So that is very concerning. And unfortunately, it just happened again. So also performed a UPS, an uninterrupted power supply test on this as well. That tripped a GFCI. Let me show you what that looked like. Do you see what happened here? Is we had using a pass-through, but when I turned on both of these, let me show you what happened over here. It tripped a GFCI on this side. So let me refresh or reset. These circuits are on that GFCI. So if we unplug this and then we start that same test over again, and I want to turn this up to the maximum heat at 1300. I don't know if you can see that. We'll turn this one on here. This one's just medium. We're going at 1700, right? If I try to plug this in, it tripped it. So you cannot use the pass-through at 1800 watts. So I'll reset this again. Let me attempt to do this. Got that one at 1300 watts. It'll come back off of that in just a second. So UPS mode at 1000 watts is fine. There has to be a threshold, probably 1400, 1200, 1400, or 1600. Because when we turn on another one, 1300, it tripped the fuse again, or the receptacle. Okay, so let's unplug it. We've determined that we can't use the UPS at a certain wattage, which I do not like, because I should be able to use the UPS, the uninterruptible power supply, up to the inverter's continuous watts. I haven't had this problem out of other portable power stations. This is one of the first times I've ever run across that, so not liking it. And although this is not something that doesn't work, it just doesn't have enough solar input. When you're talking 500 watts max and you have to be perfect with the voltage to get up to 500 watts as well at 15 amps. That's just not enough input on the solar side to make me happy. These 2400 watt with 2048 watt hours of capacity inverters, they should have at least 1200 watts of solar input. Preferably 1800 watts or better, but 500 watts is just not enough on a power station of this size. The capacity test came in at 89.6% of the rated 2048 watt hours of capacity. We only got 1,835 watt hours out of the batteries. So that means the inverter efficiency is one of the lowest efficiencies that I've tested in any portable power station. And my final thoughts on the Oukitel P2001 Plus portable power station is that I can't, out of good conscience, recommend this portable power station because it failed at so many different performance tests that are important to me. So if these are not important to you, then this may be a portable power station that you'll want to try out. If you can get it for the right price, then yes. But if you're talking about putting this in the same class as other 2400 watt portable power stations that I've tested, it just doesn't belong in the same conversation as those other portable power stations because it doesn't perform as well as they do.